right, well, this Memorial Day weekend, we honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice and gave their life while serving our country.
Yeah, one of the heroes we are remembering is Navy SEAL Chris Kyle, the deadliest sniper in American history. His story captured our attention and captured the hearts of this nation.
That's right. Fox News contributor and the widow of Chris Kyle, Taya Kyle, joins us now. Taya, thank you so much for joining us on this sacred weekend.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. The story of your husband is one a lot of Americans, thankfully, are familiar with. On this Memorial Day weekend, which means so much to you and families like you, what do you remember, and how should Americans recognize it themselves?
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing. Chris and I talked about it a lot when he was alive, of course, and we spent it honoring some of our friends who died. We'd often go to a national cemetery, and then we would celebrate the freedoms that these people fought so hard for. But one thing that struck me this year is Chris always loved the Vietnam veterans, and so do I. And I've gotten to know a lot of the survivors. Their parents died in the Vietnam War, and they were told as children not to talk about it because they didn't know how the culture would receive them or society would receive them. So to protect the children, they said, don't talk about how daddy died or mommy died. And so I think this Memorial Day would be a perfect time to go back and try to right that wrong and thank the people and remember the people who lost loved ones in the Vietnam War in particular.
You know, when you're dealing with children, right, I've got a 6-year-old and 5-year-old. How would you recommend parents talk to their children about Memorial Day?
Yeah, I think it's just being honest. I mean, I think we're at a point in our world where we have to acknowledge, and we always have been at this point, but I think right now we're kind of at a pivotal point where we have to acknowledge that evil does exist. So does good. And explaining to your children that both things exist, they always have, they always will, and that we'll always need people to fight the evil in this world is an important thing. And sometimes we lose the fight, and that's okay, but we need to remember both sides of it. That might be one way to approach it with children.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard some strong words from even the president most recently in Saudi Arabia talking to the world about the threat that we all face with terrorism. How much impact do you think that sort of speak is having on this fight with terror?
You know, I think that we just have to be honest about it, and it's a brutal truth. I don't think it's comfortable for anyone to admit that we're all at risk of terrorism. I think that's a scary place to be. But again, I think we have to find that balance, and we have to be discerning and know that we are kind people. We're a kind nation. We like to open our arms to other people in need. But we also have to recognize that a common behavior of sociopaths and people who don't have a conscience is to play on that sympathy. And that's how they get invited in, and then they exact evil. So it's a really tough balance, but I think we do have to acknowledge that there are people out there who will play on our sympathies and then take evil action against us.
Taya, you talk about being honest about good and evil in this world, and it also reminds us that words have consequences. We're going to play a clip of some on the left who just won't refuse to name this enemy and want America to apologize. Take a listen.
If there's bad governance, if there's war, if there's poverty, in this new world that we live in, we can't isolate ourselves. We can't hide behind a wall.
Just infusing more weapons into the Gulf states is not going to solve the problem of a region that needs to create more than 60 million new jobs in the next decade alone. It is to provide these booming youth populations with a quality education, with skills for the modern world, with jobs that allow them to actually build a life.
The greatest thing we can do is just unite and love on each other, and like no barriers, no borders. Like we all need to just coexist.
Give them jobs, no barriers and no borders. Give the terrorists jobs.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think about that love and unity, and that's something that I can identify with. I think we all can. If we're good people, we have that in our hearts. But I think of serial killers, okay? And so they're playing on sympathies, and we all want to be loving and open and pick up a hitchhiker, give them a ride. But let's also be honest about this. You can also get killed doing that. And so you don't stop being kind, but you have to be discerning and think, before I'm going to open up my heart, my mind, my home, I have to think about who I'm inviting in and be aware. Ask for ID, right? You're going to do certain things in your home. Treat your country like your home and think, do I invite these people in? It's really easy to say that if it's not your house or you don't think it will ever touch you. But as soon as you know that it could touch you, you start to be a little bit more aware and you start to ask more questions. That's what we need to do as a country.
I love that. The idea of not changing who you are and still being kind, but being discerning. Taya, great to see you this morning.
I think speaker message, I mean, it was exactly what we all need to hear on Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you for everything you've done, your husband Gabe. We're thinking about you and all the families on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it.